Hello, my name is Paulina Cumpian Zuniga, and today my topic is communication of revenge and weaponization of information and information operations. It's a mouthful, but I promise you it's pretty interesting. And wanted to today I wanted to merge my studies in interpersonal communication with my experience as a second lieutenant in information operations unit. So we'll explore how the idea of revenge, which is typically seen in personal relationships from what we've read, can be also used to drive military messaging and psychological influence in a much larger global scale. So a little bit about me. I already said I'm a second lieutenant in an information operations unit for the Texas Army National Guard. That does not throw away or put aside my full-time duties as a grad student and a digital media specialist. But that's more that's more on the other side, so I digress. But in this presentation, I wanted to show how revenge can be more than just a personal reaction, which is what we've been reading throughout this entire course, especially when it comes to communication revenge. We use it as an IO unit, we use it more of a strategic communication, which is both used by military and our governments. So by drawing on both my academia and my military work, I hope and I aim to explain how revenge plays out as a message, not just an emotion. So, why should we care? As media professionals, and especially as civilians too, we hear stories of revenge all the time, whether it's a protest, a conflict, or a cyber attack. You hear your best friend talking about her ex-boyfriend on social media. We see it everywhere. And when revenge is communicated well, it can gain followers, and it can justify violence, and it can change the public opinion. So that's why this matters for both personal awareness and professional strategy. So I know I used an example of like your best friend posting something about her ex, but when it comes to these kind of conflicts and protests and cyber attacks, they come at you as why it's justified and why it needs to be avenged and why it needs to continue to be justified. And so when the wrong information gets into the wrong person, it's your typical hero story where it's, you know, because this person got the wrong information and the enemies were able to justify why they're being so violent, why their illegal, immoral, and unethical views paint the narrative that our United States government is really bad and that it's really not protective. And so when it comes to that, it is our job to teach you and to protect you from all that. So not only is it important for an IO standpoint, but also for a media professional standpoint to know where we're getting our information and how to safely defend ourselves from this kind of propaganda, not only as a professional, not only as a military, not only as a soldier, but also as a civilian to protect yourself as well. So, our core interpersonal theories of revenge. I picked a couple here. We have indirect aggression, catharsis and emotional satisfaction, and then narrative control, which is framing yourself of the wrong party. These theories come from a lot of these theories, actually all of them, come from personal relationships, but they apply a lot to politics and warfare too. So in IO, information operations, we see indirect aggression through disinformation and memes and catharsis and retaliation messaging. Uh, because revenge can be indirect, it's almost like spreading rumors. It can be framed as justice, and these theories help explain why people seek revenge and how it plays out in relationships, but we'll later connect these behaviors to military level messaging. This was just kind of what the theories that I picked for the communication revenge part. So, strategic use of revenge in IO. As IO planners, there's a lot that goes into it. And so people who are nation's enemies use revenge like a narrative tool. And when you tell people your plan and it's valid and it's it's justified. They say that vengeance is moral, and they'll follow you. And that can be very powerful, and it can be very dangerous. So in information operations, revenge is used to energize, support, and delegitimize the enemy. It's not just an outburst, it's a tool that can change the story and the direction of a conflict. So IO from an enemy standpoint is to make sure that whoever they're trying to get revenge on, that their audience, their people, their community feel that the enemy's standpoint and narrative is valid and is justified, no matter if it's illegal, immoral, and unethical. So if it's validated, if it's justified, people will follow. And so that's the kind of strategy that they use, and not only IO for the United States, but also all over the world, in trying to make sure that they get a good following for whatever kind of plan and strategy they may have. Defining information operations, finally get to tell you what it is. IO is basically like influence strategy, like on steroids. It uses every communication tool available to protect our narrative and challenge our enemies. It is a military framework for influencing people's thoughts and actions. So it uses everything from psychological tactics to cyber campaigns to sway opinions and protect our narrative. And the way that the military uses this is that we have a lot of psychological operations, we have MILDEG, we have operation security, and we have cybersecurity as well. So a lot of those big words, they're combined into one, because now looking into our large scale combat operations, now into how our nation's wars are going to be looking like in the next couple of years, it's very much a hybrid war. And so we use IO now. Not only are our enemies using IO to gather more people to stand with them instead with us, we now have people fighting down on land, but we also have people fighting in the digital and cyber world, which is crazy that now we have come to a point where war has become almost hybrid and no longer just on land. So IO is definitely, or information operations, is definitely the gathering of information, whether it be through media, whether it be through code, whether it be through, through POWs, like prisoners of war. However we get our information, we gather the information, we analyze it, and figure out how we're going to defend ourselves or how we're going to retaliate back. So that's what my unit does. We gather a lot of information, and a lot of our things are classified, but that's usually what an IO does and what it is. So the first example I wanted to use, it's a little easier to understand, and this is probably one of the first examples of IO being used without direct combat. So essentially, we have Operation Fortitude, which was during World War II, before D-Day happened. Essentially, the Germans had everything fortified, and the United States Army was trying to figure out how to get back in to start their D-Day attack operations. And so the United States Army decided to create a ghost army. Essentially, they had blow-up tanks, they had fake soldiers made out of cardboard, they had even they had fake radio talk to confuse the Germans on what was going on. And essentially, they did that. They made a whole different flank, so that way their ghost army was being attacked, and they were able to go around and get the job done and fulfill their mission. So this is a good example of psychological operations and IO, but it's without direct combat or direct fire. And the reason I compare this, or I chose this one of the examples as communication revenge, was I found it as a form of informational revenge. So it was misleading the enemy to pay them back for their own deceptions earlier in the war, because Germany had decepted us, and so we found it as payback. So this was like an easier way to say that the United States found payback in one of the wars. My second example would be in ISIS propaganda. So ISIS propaganda thrives on storytelling, and they used revenge narratives to justify attacks and recruit new members by showing suffering and promising revenge. ISIS's entire communication strategy is very much revenge based, and so it appeals to pain, loss, and the promise of justice. So they weaponize that pain through storytelling. They very much target the underdogs, and how every movie targets the underdogs, and like, if you're feeling this way, you should join my fight because I am right. Um, but we all have a moral compass, and we all know what was right and what is wrong. So, without getting too much of it, this is one of the examples that I had that pulled up from The Guardian on ISIS propaganda back in 2015. It says this is our Call of Duty, and we respawn in Johanna. I think that's Johanna. My head is covering it, but so that's one of the propagandas they use, and so it very much says that they're ready to fight no matter how much they lose. Like they also used the name of a very popular Warzone game, which is Call of Duty. So they use this kind of propaganda to gain followers not only on their homeland but also on our home front. So example number 3 is a really big one. It was the Russian election interference in the United States elections back in 2016, I believe. So Russia didn't invade America in 2016. It definitely manipulated it. So they used their form of communication revenge spanned from disinformation. So their disinformation was designed to look like justice for past grievances, just cloaked in like horrible digital revenge. So their goal was to divide Americans and portray it as payback. So again, communication revenge. They found it as a way to pay back Americans, well, to pay back America for what we did, or for what they say that we did. So there's also there's an example here of some of the posts right there. I couldn't find the big posts, but those are some of the examples that they released. They just released them in 2018, but those were some of the posts that Russia had been disinforming the public about, or using to disinform the public. So linking linking this to interpersonal themes, what we see in toxic relationships, we see like manipulation, silent treatment, blame. It's mirrored in global conflicts. And understanding personal revenge helps us decode internal or international messaging. And the same dynamics that cause drama in friendships show up in war. So rumors, alliances, passive aggression, it's all scaled up in IO. So whatever you've been doing since high school, imagine that with countries and scaled to like 100, 0 to 100 on the quicks. And here are some things like meme warfare was a big thing. I don't know if you can see behind on the border, but those are a bunch of memes happening in the political side of things. So, and a lot of it's just indirect aggression. It's not people like coming at you and saying that you suck. It's people creating these memes, basically saying that you suck and making fun of you. So a lot of these, we had a lot of meme warfares back in that time, and we still also have meme warfares, especially with these past elections. I've definitely seen a lot of meme warfare with our two parties, and then, like you said, with strategic catharsis, so national satisfaction from perceived justice, and identity-based narratives, so in-group and out-group dynamics. Basically, just a bunch of high school girl stuff amplified by like 100 globally. Some of the psychological and ethical impacts this might have would be that revenge can be intoxicating. It unifies people very quickly, but it can escalate just as quickly. So that's why ethics and awareness matter so much in information operations. The psychology of revenge makes people feel powerful and united, but it can also backfire. And as IO professionals, we must ask, does this message help in the long run, or does it deepen the conflict? So again, we really we deal with so much high school girl stuff that it's amplified by so much. And so we have to think about how this is going to affect our nation, our partners globally. So this really is a job where you have to figure out what's going to be intoxicating for your nation's people. And that's why it's very important, not only as a professional, but as a civilian, to understand what the difference is um, when looking at this kind of thing. So what this means for us, revenge is universal, but it's also strategic. So whether in a personal life or in national security, understanding how revenge is communicated really gives us the tools to influence, analyze, and act ethically. And so, whether it's in a tweet, a war strategy, revenge is communication, regardless. And our job as communicators and IO officers is to understand it, use it wisely, and recognize when it's being used against us. So, again, as professionals, as a civilian, as soldiers, we have to recognize what is being used against us and what we're putting out there on the media as well. And for that, these are my references. And give you a minute to look at that. I forgot to add a lot of these pictures too came from The Guardian. The Guardian was a big help on some of the pictures as well. And that is going to be the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great life.